3, 2, yes, I think. Okay. Oh, has Maria gone? Okay. Hello, everyone. We are live on YouTube. Thank you for joining us on Archaeologists in Quarantine. Today is episode 2, and where we'll be discussing archaeology, anthropology, and forensic sciences. I'm joined by Ben and Maria. Maria has just frozen. I'm going to re-invite her in. So one moment, please.
Typical, isn't it?
Yeah, the joys of modern technology for you, especially now that everybody is using it. They're using the software, aren't they? So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I'm going to see. There we go. I see her. She's coming online. Maria, are you there?
Yeah, hey, sorry.
Okay, so it's now 2 of you. I love it. I'm going to stop the other video. I hope this works. Apologies, but the joys of live streaming. So you get to see it here first. If you're interested in live streaming, this is what happens, okay? Remove. Okay. I think that worked.
Cool.
It worked? Okay, let's just go. I hope we're still live. I don't know. Okay, so as I just said, we're going to be focusing on archaeology, anthropology, and forensic sciences, which is great because I'm joined by 2 people who can give their insight into the subjects. It's quite vast, so we're not going to get too technical. We just want to give a nice overview and talk about our experiences as being archaeologists in quarantine. So first up, Ben, thank you for joining us. If it's possible, could you give us a quick intro into yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. So I'm Ben. I do Ben's Bones on Instagram. It's a lot of fun. I put up a new image every Friday and I ask everyone to guess and see what goes on. I am actually just coming to the end of my undergrad doing Archaeology and Forensic Sciences. I do that at Bournemouth. And hopefully I'll be starting a bioarchaeology master's there in September, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
have you found out what's happening with the
Well,
closure?
yeah, we don't really know at the moment. I'm still waiting to find out whether I'm actually accepted onto the course, but even then, we don't know if it's going to go ahead or if it's delayed or anything. So we'll find out soon enough, hopefully, but we just don't know.
Okay, Maria, just in case anybody didn't see our episode on Wednesday, would you able just a quick intro into yourself?
Yes, so I'm Maria and I study Near Eastern archaeology at the University of Copenhagen, and I'm doing my final semester on my graduate, so I'm writing my master's thesis right now. So yeah, I focus on the pre-pottery Neolithic in the Levant especially, but my thesis is going to be on the whole Near East in the pre-pottery Neolithic. Yeah.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, I had to Google afterwards. Pre-pottery Neolithic is just another time period within the archaeological record. So you can just Google pre-pottery Neolithic and you'll be able to get a better idea. But it's very cool. I'm so happy you introduced me, and I hope maybe some others to that on Wednesday. I should introduce myself just in case. My name is Natasha. I am a commercial field archaeologist, which basically means I do archaeology all day, every day, but the field aspect. So most of the time I'm on construction sites during pre-development phases. Infrastructure projects, you name it, we're there. So we get a lot of stick all the time, but hey, we're used to it. So I would say the first question, being in quarantine, how has it affected you, Ben, and your studies?
Well, thankfully, because I'm in 3rd year, not too much. We weren't actually able to submit our dissertations physically, which I'm sure you guys are fully aware. That is a big part of university, being able to finally give in this big document that you've been working on for so long, and we just had to send it in an email.
We actually, in my university, you just hand it in online, and then like a month and a half later, you get an email where it says like, you got your grade. we don't have any of those formalities and traditions. So it's like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's how
Yeah,
it is.
so yeah, we did it much the same way that you ordinarily would, I suppose. But in terms of assignments and exams, we've had to do assignments as per normal, and our exams have basically just been changed to another assignment in the style of an exam, where it's just a really long essay and horrible. But
But
it could be worse.
how are they doing it exactly? Because obviously, maybe I just zoned out there. But so obviously, normally in an exam, you go there and then you're faced with these questions and you've got to choose, isn't it? If I remember correctly, between a few different options, you choose one and you base your essay on that. So how are they doing it this way? Because it's, if anything, you can, like, how is it done in an exam setting? It's not, is it? It's just an assignment.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much just an assignment. So I'm sure it's different for different year groups within different departments, within different universities. But for me personally, it has essentially just been an extended assignment where, like an exam where you would get a section A and a section B, and you would choose questions from each of those. We also get that, but then it's an essay that we can spend as much time on as we wish, with as many references as we wish, which you wouldn't usually have in an exam. And it's capped to 1,500 words for each question. But I'm sure that's different for everyone else. So it could be a lot worse.
I guess so. In a way, it's kind of, it's not as stressful. You don't have that anxiety where you're waiting outside in a line. For me, I remember I went to Bournemouth University as well. I remember you have to have your university card, and then you're just trying to memorize everything before, you've got to take your bags, and then you've got to make sure you're there at least 5 minutes or 10 minutes before.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just even just sitting there, isn't it, with your pen, and you're putting your pen down, and you're just like, okay, breathe. Who can you see that you know around you? Someone else to smile at while you're just thinking, oh no, I'm going to lose it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so stressful. But instead, these assignments are due in on the 2nd of June for me. And we've already got them. So I'm already working on one of them at the moment. Whereas in an exam, you would only know once you've sat down and have the 2 hours to do it without any references or anything. So you just had to pray that you remembered what you knew was correct. Whereas
Really
here, you can just Google it. It's wonderful.
I'm jealous. Yeah, I think Maria as well is.
Well, no, because that's how, yeah, I'm not jealous of the normal exam.
No, I mean Ben's situation. It sounds good.
That's how we do exams mostly here.
Oh.
So that's actually very normal for me. We have to write often 15 to 20 pages essays on a topic we decide for ourselves. And then we have a couple of, like a month or so for that, or 1.5. It depends when you come up with your topic, basically. So the earlier you get like an idea for your topic, the more time you have to write it. But at the same time, you still have class. So like if you have to write 20 pages and do classes at the same time, so usually have around 1 month for, yeah, I think my last exam was 25 pages, which is basically what my bachelor's degree thesis had to be, 25 to 30 pages. So actually that's the norm for me. That's to sit at home or at the library and write. So I think yours, like the normal one, sounds super stressful, and I'm happy it's not me.
Yeah, that sounds really good though. It sounds like a much better system, really.
Yeah, like it's really good in some ways, but sometimes it can get, if you have like a long time to write one assignment and it's 25 pages, that's a lot to sit and write. And yeah, and then we have something really, really annoying. They have, they don't have it anymore, like the new people who started the archaeology course, but we have to hand in like our question or like a research topic, and then we have to do something we call pensum, which is where you have to show your sources before you even start writing. So you have to hand in like 20, I think it's like normally it's around 2,000 pages of sources before you even start writing, and you have like a deadline which is like 1.5 months before you even start writing. So you never
Wow.
really read any of your sources before you hand it in, because you simply don't have like the time. That's super stressful too. And then like when you start writing, you'll like change out at least half of these sources you handed in the beginning because you never read them, and the idea you had 2 months ago is different now. Yeah. But it's really nice to just write on a topic that you chose yourself, and yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. But, like, yeah.
To be honest, I don't miss the studying aspect at all. I mean, now it's a good time now because there's that security. A lot of archaeologists during the recession, a lot of commercial archaeologists, that's when they went back into academia and they did a master's, or they maybe went into doing further education in some sort of way. It definitely kind of gives more, there's less stress, I feel, and I could be wrong, but in a way, like it's definitely an easier situation, especially if this pandemic is to continue on. Even I think I probably would consider, if there is even a possibility to go back to academia, I probably would consider it for September, into maybe public archaeology or something, who knows.
Yeah.
But as I had said earlier, I would like us to kind of steer towards archaeology, anthropology, and forensic sciences. So I think the first thing is, Ben, if you're happy to take this task, would you be able to describe the difference between archaeology, anthropology, and forensic sciences? And I probably should say in the UK, we do, and maybe even in Europe, West Europe for sure, we have a different use of the word anthropology.
Yeah, it's way different. It's quite a big undertaking, actually.
Very basic. Let's very basic. It's okay.
Yeah, so I think in its most basic form, starting with forensics, is anything that is dealt with within court. If it's to be dealt with within the law or within a jury system, it needs a forensic science to provide evidence. Archaeology is essentially forensic science, but for things that are over 200 years old. And we only say that loosely because typically there won't be anything of forensic value beyond that age. Like, for instance, when you dig up a mass burial in France from the First or Second World War, it's quite likely that those people will have living relatives. And to then repatriate them or find their family means that you need to go through a legal system and all of that. But typically, if you're dealing with an archaeological site, say Roman or medieval, to tell who's an ancestor of them is just nonsensical, really. You know, there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of relatives. So archaeology is just dealing with, why is this relevant? Do we actually need to be digging it? And if not, should we be preserving it? Which I'm sure you have to tackle on a daily basis, really. And then with anthropology, instead of looking at the physical material within archaeology, where we're digging it up, we're feeling it, and oh yes, this is very nice, it's a badge, we are looking at rather what it meant to the people at the time. Why is it important to them? What significance did it have? Did it have a higher meaning? Like, did it show status within the community and the population? Say, for instance, if you had a flint arrowhead compared to a bronze one, but they come from the same stratigraphy layer, so the same layer within the dirt, so they were deposited at the same time, we can tell that the flint holder was probably not as superior within the community as a person with the bronze one, because they could pay more or were more respected to have, owned it. So the anthropology side of it can be very interesting. Personally, I prefer the nitty gritty of what I can get my hands on, you know. So uh, looking at skeletal remains in particular is very interesting, and actually has a lot of an overlap with both anthropology, archaeology, and forensics. Although I'm looking at archaeological material that is bone, what significance did it have to the people? On the flip side, looking forensically, what happened to this person to lead to this event where they were buried here? Maybe there are diseases within the bone, or marks that could be associated with attacking, or the eventual attack that might have led to their death, you know. Equally, if there was a disease that might have done this. And we can also look at ancestry in this regard as well. So if there's a hereditary trait that's passed down, something maybe like scoliosis, a curvature in the spine, typically is hereditary. If someone with scoliosis has children, their children, and so on, will all have it. So we can see this within the lineage, and sometimes if you were digging a cemetery, you could see actually it's quite likely all these people are related. Then you might do a DNA test in the exact same way that you would in forensics, and you find out, yes, they are all related. How about that? But really, there is such an overlap with all of them that it is almost silly to say that they are their own thing individually. Archaeology deals with people in the same way anthropology does. Forensics deals with archaeology in the same way that they do together. It's just there's a difference in age and a different perspective. A person died a month ago, oh, it's forensics. A person died 200 years ago, it's archaeological. So it's quite fun.
That's a great explanation, actually. Sorry, continue.
No, it's okay. It was one of my lecturers actually went on a bit of a rant about it around a few beers, I think. We just sat him down like, okay, what's the difference between these two? Well, I'll tell you.
I think it's the best conversations, isn't it? Is the evening pub after a filled school, or
oh, absolutely. yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like we say, there's such an overlap between them all. You'll do a DNA test on a recently deceased person in the same way that you would an ancient person. It all works the same way, and a lot of people have said while I've been at university actually that archaeology led the way to forensics. We look at the stratigraphic layer within the sediment to tell the age of things. We do DNA tests to tell lineage and ancestors. We do isotopic analysis to tell where they came from, which is just chemicals in the bone, for those who may not know. In the same way that we do DNA tests in forensics to tell who they might be, where they came from, yada. And the same way that we use stratigraphy to tell how long ago they might have been deposited there. If it's quite an old case, maybe from the mid 1900s, there'll be a lot more soil layers there from when they were dug. So a more recent grave will hold just as much information as an ancient one. So it really starts to blur the line between what's archaeological, anthropological, and forensics.
Thank you for that. I think actually, because a lot of people do not understand the differences, and it's very loosely used sometimes, especially when we look at the West Europe. I'm not sure the whole of Europe, so I would say I know for sure the UK and the west of Europe. I know that from my own personal research. Maybe Maria, is it the whole of Europe that would say archaeology and anthropology is separate?
Yeah, in Denmark
Whole
it
of
is
Europe, isn't it?
even in two different institutions,
Yeah.
and it's two different things.
Of course, in America, it's a bit funny. Their anthropology is more akin to our archaeology, and archaeology is such a loose term. It's like it's just kind of, Indiana Jones, isn't it?
Yeah, like you need to do anthropology to get to archaeology in the US, where
You're a minor, I think.
like in the West, Europe at least, it's like two different subjects and you specialize in one of them. You don't have to do anthropology to become an archaeologist. I spoke with one from the US years ago and she was like, oh yeah, I study archaeology. I'm like on my third year on the undergrad and I just started archaeology because she had to do 2 years of anthropology or something. Maybe I don't remember the timeline, but you don't get to archaeology right away. You have to wait a bit before you can specialize in it.
I always
So
find it quite funny when someone from the States comes over here like,
mm,
oh, everything's so old. And
yeah,
you just say like, actually, yeah, it is.
I have a friend from the US and she's like, I told her like the building I live in, it's only like a bit more than 100 years old, but like in the US, that would be like, oh wow, it's more than 100 years old. And everything like, yeah, I
Yeah,
met
it's
her.
just mad.
Yeah, so for her it's yeah, it's kind of funny that like things are so old here and I don't even feel like Denmark has a lot of old stuff, so but,
We take it for granted. I think that's what it is. It's one
yeah.
of those things, you don't appreciate something until you go somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling someone the other day about how literally where I live, you walk 10 minutes down the road and there are round barrows.
Mm.
And they're what, about 4,000 years old?
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
insane.
And you just would not get anything like that in the whole of the United States. It's just
No,
madness, honestly.
yeah.
And like I say, I've been living here 20 years, never
Wow.
knew.
That's
The
insane.
beauty of it, I think. That is definitely the beauty of archaeology and earthworks and all these things that, especially now with modern technology. So I don't know if you remember, we had that drought. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, we had a drought and some people had started using their drones in their local areas. And we started to see all these earthworks that suddenly popped up because of the drought. And it's amazing now how technology is shaping the way that we can do our work and how we can analyze material. And a lot faster, especially
Yeah.
from my point of view, where we don't get to really excavate anything or investigate something until there's a developer then.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting to see how it's changing a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost wish we would change the way we do things, honestly. Like, we can't dig something until we know someone wants to build something else on top of it. Like, well, we could just dig it anyway.
Yeah. I guess that's how it works if you're like affiliated with a university. Like that's at least how it works in Denmark. That's like, so the university and the country you work in kind of funds your excavation. And
Yeah.
then you can kind of say, oh, so we know there's kind of something here. So will you just give us some money and we'll do this? Like, sure, here's your money.
Yeah.
I've just seen on Instagram, we have a Pawnee archaeologist who is a
what?
USA. His tagline is, I don't know how you pronounce it. Sorry, Carlton. I'm not sure actually how to pronounce this, but Pawnee archaeologist. Anyway, he's from the US. And if you want to come online, send us a message or maybe add you into this conversation.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Maybe it'd be good to get an American involved in the chat.
I'm sorry, is it not horny, like in horny? Like I no, but I couldn't hear you, and it sounded so much like horny, and I was like, that's a fresh name.
No, it's a region. It's a region in America. It's a region in the States, and he specializes in that area. It's very cool, his research, and he's a PhD student.
Okay, I'm so sorry. But
it's okay. I don't think he'll be offended.
I hope not. I just thought it was a very, very fresh name to put out there. To
compose myself. Apologies. I'm gonna see if he's if he's happy to join in. I'll send him the link and let's see.
Yeah, then I can also really apologize to him for.
Okay, whilst I send the link, earlier we were off camera. We were speaking about ways that we can get away with burying the dead.
Yeah.
So whilst I tried to get hold of Carlton, maybe you two would like to discuss that and educate the viewers.
It's like the series on Netflix, How to Get Away with Murder, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You probably know more about it since you do forensics, but as I told you earlier, the whole giving the body to a pig has always been like, I think, or putting someone in acid, maybe. I don't know. Like the thing with the
Yeah.
pigs, like I don't have pigs, but then it wouldn't be that obvious that I fed it to a pig, though, if I just go somewhere random.
Yes, absolutely.
And they wouldn't suspect me. It wouldn't be like, oh, but like you have pigs, so you could have done it. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I don't. Like, I don't
No, pigs are actually a really good way to do it. They tend to get quite excited and
eat everything.
leave nothing. Yeah.
They eat the bones and everything. So that's why I think it's a pretty good way. Just have to be
Yeah.
sure to not leave any forensic evidence, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, usually the dead giveaway is if there's like a rag of clothing in there that the pig might have avoided, you know?
Yeah.
Horrible stuff.
Like just take that away first and burn it, and then like go far away to a pig farm, far away
Yeah.
from where you burnt the clothes, and then like go first of all far away from your house, then burn the clothes, then go further away and give the person to a pig.
I think you've thought about this a little too much.
I listen to a lot of crime podcasts,
Mm.
but it was actually just because you said that about the clothes that I just thought about, like you have to, and also like the further away you are from where you live, the less reason there is to suspect you, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the the thing is from studying forensics is that you watch things like CIS or Silent Witness, and you're there like, no, that's just not right.
I could imagine.
Like the way they cordon off the site, the people they have on site, and they're picking things up with pens and stuff. It's like, no,
No, don't.
someone
I
didn't do their research.
Yeah. I get that. But like, oh, what was I thinking about? Well, that thought disappeared.
It's okay, maybe it's a good thing it's disappeared, who knows?
Yeah, who knows what I was about to say.
Don't incriminate yourself, please.
Yeah.
You want to see this footage as a part of somebody's criminal trial. So let's...
Yeah.
No, what I wanted to say, which actually is incriminating to me too, for all I've already said, is that I've been voted several times to be the one most likely to kill someone.
Oh, wonderful.
Mostly because when I get very drunk and someone tells me about someone who's done something bad to them, I'll be like, do you want me to kill this person for you?
Okay, remember we are live streaming on YouTube, Instagram.
Don't worry, I'm a very peaceful person. I would never.
Okay, but, I mean, she's saying this as she's drinking a cup that has... What's the print?
This is Moomins.
Yeah, it's Moomins.
Ah, Moomins.
This small one, little me. My family always says that's me because she's extremely stubborn.
Okay. Anyway,
I got all the cups I have from my mom, and all of them has her on it because that's the theme.
This is my cup for today.
Oh, nice.
It's been in the distro quite a few times. It's technically a company called Beavertown, but I love it because of the skulls.
Ah,
they're multicolored.
Oh yes.
Oh, that's very nice.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
My coaster, that was my Christmas present.
Oh.
Yeah.
Does it say? Sorry.
So it's my because the camera's backwards, isn't it? Tash Archaeology behind the trowel.
Oh, that's wonderful.
No, it's not that. Okay. Like I couldn't see it proper.
Yeah. I probably will put this online, but with the option to add your own name in the middle to personalize it. That's my plan.
That's a good idea.
That's later Tasha's problem.
Yeah. that's tomorrow's problem. I'll put that online. Damn it, that's my idea, guys. Okay, this is my idea. Steal it from me. Watch now. Next week, I'll just see everyone now selling these coasters, and I'll just be there in the back, like.
This wasn't my idea.
Yeah, it's fine. I patent it somehow. I don't know how. Okay. Next question. Okay, let's think of a theme that's related to our subject.
Murder.
Okay, to be honest, murder is interesting in the sense. Oh, we've got a question.
Ooh.
From I've forgotten where you're from. I'm so sorry, my dear. I've forgotten where you're from. I want to say where you're from. Okay, the question is, she's from where are you from? Makina_A. And I will say, I've forgotten. I'm so sorry. We met in February. She's not answering. I'll answer the question anyway. The question is, I don't know very much about archaeology, but I'm very passionate about ancient Egypt and pyramids. How much of ancient Egypt history is discovered so far? Oh,
Big question.
That's a big statement.
And like, that's so difficult because of climate and like, I don't know, I think like
Uzbekistan, sorry.
Yeah, I think like a really big issue about like archaeology in general, but especially like in the Middle East, is that it was so colonial and people just went there to loot and get treasure. So like the first, I don't know, 100 years almost probably in archaeology in the Middle East, or maybe 70 years, it was just find treasures and big burials and loot them and take it home. So like you have that issue in Egypt too, because like you didn't really concern yourself too much about the general public of ancient Egypt. So you didn't have like a lot of research into that until like maybe 40 years ago, where you started thinking about the normal Egyptian person. So like there's a lot of discovered stuff about that, I think. And I think I read sometime that there's like at least 300-400 more pyramids that haven't been discovered, but that's some years ago. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I mean, Sudan. Do people even know about the pyramids in Sudan? Like, it's not why they're not as popular, you know. So I think it's interesting. It's to do with information and how it's perceived. The Giza Pyramid complex is famous for a number of. It's how many novels are based there, films, TV series, comic books. I don't know, you name it. There's so much around the complex. But what about everything else? And all the mystery lies with those, particularly the three. But there's so much more that people don't know about or even want to think about. I think that's what it is. It's about.
The thing is, like, actually in Nubia, there's more pyramids than in Egypt. So it's like, but I think it's because they're not as massive. They don't look as extreme, like they're smaller. And again, there's been this fascination with Egypt for so many years. So like Nubia has just been overlooked, even though it's been part of ancient Egypt civilization many times. But
I think something that needs to be held in mind as well is that there's a definite trend to us finding things that are predominantly of the higher classes, the leaders, or the rich throughout history. Like all the pyramids and everything, they were the elite, the pharaohs. All the little people, they just they died, got buried. We see nothing of them. And that goes throughout all of history. We dig up these round barrows down the road from me, and they're probably the chieftain of the Bronze Age or Neolithic tribe. What's of the other people? Don't know, don't care.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really big issue. But like you have, for example, the workers' village in Egypt, the El Medina, which is really interesting because it was inhabited for so long, and it's mainly workers. So that's like one of those places where you start to see like the normal ancient Egyptian, how they lived and stuff like that, instead of only like the elite, I should say. But that's not very often. It's still like what we see in the landscape is not the normal ancient Egyptian, it is the elites. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the biggest archaeological site for, normal people is probably something like Pompeii, where everyone was killed in this massive disaster
Mhm.
without any prejudice towards class or anything.
Yeah.
And there's no way to tell how significant they were within the society. So all of these people that we find, encased in rock, we
Mhm.
don't know who they are, but they're still of value historically.
Yeah.
I think in general, Pompeii, it's one of those examples that it has given so much insight, and I think that's why it's so famous, how well preserved the site is because of the natural disaster.
Mhm.
And it's true. I mean, if we look, I remember there's an exhibition at the British Museum in 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
I remember I was at university, I was at Bournemouth University, and just seeing the way they did the setup on that was very interesting. And there's so much I think we didn't even consider, and it's one of those things. I think it's why people are so fascinated with mummies, mummification, because you can see more, even bog bodies, how well preserved something is. It's as soon as bones are bones in a sense, but when you start to see flesh and hair, I think it there's that connection that
Yeah.
is kind of lost when you just see a skeletal remain and nothing else. And I think that's why there's such a massive fascination with Pompeii, bog bodies.
Yeah.
You
It
know.
feels more like a person. I remember digging in Rome and like excavating cremated bones. There is so often where you kind of like forget that this was once a person because it's the skeletal remains. Sometimes I would be like, oh fuck, this person lived like 2,300 years ago and probably walked around here where I'm digging him out from. It's it's very different because they don't have faces, and they like, unless you have like a crania, for example, and you have more of a face or skull. But like when you do cremated bones, it's it's like small pieces, and then you find a tooth, or then you find like the frontal or something, but it's never a full person. And
That's actually a problem I had with my undergrad dissertation, because they were on cremated remains as well. And it's like, there is so much interpretation I can put on this, but there is so little evidence here of the person. I
yeah,
I can't justify any of it.
no, yeah, cremated remains are really difficult in that sense. I really think people who work with cremated remains and stuff are really impressive because they get information out of it, and that's like, it's already like, I feel like bones can like tell you a lot if you have a full skeleton, but like if you only have parts of it, that's really impressive if you get something from it.
Yeah, I can tell you, it's tricky.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah.
I wonder how is it done then? Because obviously, from my point of view, when I see something, I know roughly how old it is from the pottery, so the fabric material.
Hmm.
So from my point of view, when I'm on site, I see something. Oh, that looks. Oh, is that cremated? Is that cremation there? And then I look and I'll expose, and we might do like a block lift, depending
Yeah.
on the situation. If we can, we'll do a block lift, or we'll just expose. It depends really on the urn. I'm not sure the
Yeah.
technical. Is it still called an urn, even if it's Bronze Age?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I look at the pottery. I'm like, okay, that fabric material, oh, it's Bronze Age, for example. That's what I've been doing recently. The site that we were on, and we also had a Bronze Age cemetery that we excavated 10 years ago, literally in very close proximity. So we already knew an idea what we would get, which was nice. There was nothing too surprising in that sense, so we were very happy that we
Oh,
could get a
wonderful.
continuation. But yeah, so how do they analyze the remains? How does it work?
Well, limited experience. However,
Yeah.
um, in much the same way that you've been discussing there, in that you look at the material evidence that's in with it, whatever that may be. You might have, personal items that might come from clothing or tools, or it could just be the burial urn, or maybe charcoal that they were burned with.
Yeah.
If you can't tell from the stratigraphy or from the material evidence, the only real way to tell by then is to do an isotopic analysis, which is what was done on my undergrad one. They did a isotopic analysis of charcoal that was associated with it, on the assumption that it was burnt with the person, but we'll gloss over that. And we found then that it was around the Middle Bronze Age time. So we can then say quite conclusively that this was buried at the same time as the charcoal, so therefore it's quite likely to be Middle Bronze Age remains. But then it's a matter of, well, was it put in the ground in an organic, holder, and that's decayed away, or was it just deposited as is, and which would be quite weird, but we can't judge what they were doing back then. So to tell what is what with cremated remains is really difficult, and with the set that I had, it was really, really fragmented. There was hardly any structure to any of it at all. So we could just say, this is bone, and it has been burnt. But that's kind of it.
But you would
So,
also be able to tell, like, for approximately how long, depending on the color of the bone, right? Like, so
yeah,
how,
exactly.
for example.
Exactly. So the ones we were pulling out were perfectly white, like paper. So they were calcined, like you say, which means a temperature of around 1,000 degrees, which is really hot for a fire, especially back then. It just means that. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I just thought that that might also be like why the bones are so fragmented and so fragile, because like they've been burned
Exactly.
at a high degree, so they're like
Exactly. Yeah. It means that there's no organic material left within the bone. It's just the calcium element left, and that would be why they're so fragile, so fragmented.
yeah,
But it means that these people knew what they were doing. This pyre was made to burn that hot, so that
yeah.
this person, well, there was nothing, so that there would be nothing left,
Mm,
essentially.
yeah.
And which went on to explain why our deposits were so small. Like I could hold all of it in the palm of my hand,
Wow.
which, as you two know, is not indicative of a whole person.
No.
So they were either, it burnt so well that was all that was left, or they specifically chose to take this part of the person. So
Yeah.
yeah, you can put any interpretation on it as you wish, but there is a lot that you can tell from it if you know what you're looking for.
That's interesting. I've just got another question.
Yeah.
From InArc_Center. They are based in India and they are trying to promote Indian archaeology. Very cool account. Maria, I think they follow you as well. And Ben, they probably will follow you after.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll look out for
Yeah,
them.
they're really cool.
Yeah.
So they just asked, please explain the main features of the archaeological site. So I'm not sure which site you are speaking of specifically.
Can you say the question again?
Please explain the main features of the archaeological site. I think maybe they mean like a general overview of being able to distinguish between a natural feature, something that's maybe from trees, things like this, or animal activity, so like a burrow, some sort of animal burrowing, to a natural archaeological feature. I think it's quite a large
Yeah,
question.
that's a wide one.
Yeah, but in a nutshell, we look at anything that gives us a slight indication of activity on the site, from slight color differentiation, the feeling. If you're troweling something more compact, something a little bit looser, that gives us indication. Of course, the color. That is the first thing that we will see in all senses, is the color of it. If you can see something very dark and the natural is chalk, that's going to pop out. Another one could be sometimes even the smell. Some really pungent smell you can get when you unearth something. Sometimes, yes, it's contaminated, the more recent activity, but all of this gives us an indication of an archaeological feature. If we talk about walls, again, we look at the formation of bricks. Are they loose? Have they just been dumped in or knocked over, or is it actually solid? Can we see bonding material? all of this helps us. It's a very large question, and hopefully I've given you a slight indication into how we maybe approach archaeological features. But it all starts with cleaning. We need to clean
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
And that's
Trying
really,
to understand the sediment layers and knowing the environment that was there at the time is a big part of it as well. Because
it's all
although
about,
it may be, a marshy, muddy area now, it could have been absolutely barren before, or maybe a forest.
Yeah.
Completely
Yes.
different environment. And the only way we could tell is by digging through these layers and saying, that's different.
Mm.
And then trying to figure out why.
Yeah. Definitely.
we have another question from YouTube. What's the current situation with archaeological jobs? Is everyone at home now? It's more to do with a question about quarantine, I would assume. Okay, how about you guys both say first, and then I can maybe address it. So from your both of your point of views, what's happening with archaeological work, or maybe the industry in general?
Well, there's not much going on my end. I've finished uni now, so I'm waiting between courses. So I'm just kind of here like, see what happens. Hope for the best.
So in Denmark, we don't really have commercial archaeology as much as you do in the UK. So like there's fewer jobs, I think, in general. And I'm finishing up my master's now. I'll be done in August. I will have my oral defense of the exam of this thesis. And I don't know about jobs because there is not a whole lot. And also I've specialized in something that's not in Denmark. So that might be a bit difficult, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to like move my whole life to the Middle East at the moment. So I'll probably apply for something here if there is something, or else I'm thinking of moving to England and apply for jobs there because there's generally more than there is here, and I want to do field archaeology. And yeah, so here in Denmark, most of excavations are through universities and museums and the municipalities. So we don't have that industry as you do in the UK. So that means fewer jobs, obviously.
Okay, so I will talk about UK commercial archaeology. Right now, it's a bit of a strange situation depending where you are in the UK. If you're an urban unit or a rural unit, this basically means, do you mainly work in the city, or do you mainly have projects in a more countryside, village-esque sort of environment? So they're quite different in the UK. Most of the time we kind of separate it. You have units that are better. Sorry, when I say units, I mean companies. You have archaeological companies that might be more well known for very built up, deep stratigraphy sites. Then you might have ones that are very good and at sites that might be like in more agricultural areas that we know for at least the last 200-300 years have been agricultural lands, and they're more likely to get the prehistoric stuff. And of course, we have units that specialize in maritime archaeology. So they put on their diving suits, or even coastal archaeology. They go around the coast and they look at eroding shipwrecks and timber beams, revetments, all these things. So depending on which company you're working on, it's kind of the situation. So in my personal situation and working in London, some units have stopped and others are carrying on. I'm trying to be diplomatic. Okay. And of course, we all have a choice whether we want to work. If it's safe for us to travel, we've all been told if it's not safe for you to travel to work, then don't do it. Keep to your 2-meter distance. So Maria, we have to keep to 2 meters, like you guys as well. Yeah. And we have to make sure when we're traveling to work, when we're coming back, that we're adhering to those rules. So for me, where I live, to then go to site on the other side of London, which in normal situations are an hour and a half, which is fine, no problem. But in this current situation, I have no idea, 3 hours one way. So now I've had to agree to go on furlough. So I'm actually going to be at home, but some people are still working and they're still happy and safe and able to go to work. If they have their own vehicle, they're cycling, they're able to walk, then of course they will go. Each person, the personal choices. So archaeology is still going. Sorry, I'm now ranting a little bit. Archaeology is still going because we do work on construction sites. So it's all about the development process. So they need us on site. And it's down to the staff and the project managers to coordinate it, to make sure everybody is doing it safe. But for instance, in London, the company I work for, the construction company is enforcing the rule to the T. They're monitoring, making sure everybody is adhering to 2-meter distance. They're continuously cleaning communal areas, so the canteen. They have a maximum limit, I think, of 4 people or 5 people in the canteen at one time. Like, they're really on it. So it's definitely down to each company, each project. We actually do have Carlton, who will be joining us, who is an American archaeologist. And he's jumping on now. So I'm just going to get
Wonderful.
the Instagram stream to swivel to me, please, while I go into my computer and add Carlton in. Oh, actually, no, it's okay if they see him. No, it's fine. No, because last week on Wednesday, I forgot, and I started pressing some buttons, and everyone started seeing like the backstage stuff. Kind of, gets rid of the allurement. I'm just going to wait for Carlton to jump on. I don't know. Hopefully you didn't see our comment about his name, because that's the region. He'll tell you more about it himself. Yeah. This is great. I love this. This is why I love live streaming. Yeah, I love it. It makes it a bit more exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll wait for him to come. Oh, okay. Let's do this. Going to minimize. Oh, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me on this morning.
Thank you for joining us. You came online literally as we had were speaking about American archaeology, anthropology, and the terms. And you literally popped up, and I was like, I need him online right now to explain to all of us the difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So you guys want to know what the difference between American archaeology and anthropology is?
Yeah, but first maybe introduce yourself. Yeah, can you introduce yourself? Sorry. We're all Instagram buddies, but we don't actually, none of us actually know each other. So we're all meeting each other at the same time. So Carlton, please introduce yourself and explain your Instagram name and that region, which is why your name is that.
Yes.
Please.
So my name is Carlton Gover. I'm a PhD student in anthropology at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I am this morning. So it's still kind of early here, so I'm just sucking down coffee to wake up. My Instagram name is Pawnee Archaeologist, and the reason for that is I am a tribal citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. I work for their Cultural Resources Division as a side gig for being a busy PhD student, and I do a lot of tribal consultation as well as cultural resources management for the tribe itself. So pretty busy. And then I'm also on a podcast, A Life in Ruins, with 2 of my buddies who I got our masters with at the University of Wyoming.
That's wonderful. That's really cool.
We will add the links in. I will make sure I add them in later for everyone, in case you don't know where it is. But it's awesome. I've listened to some of your podcasts. Love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it's a lot of fun. And who are you guys exactly? Because I know Tosh just through Instagram, but Ben and Maria, I don't know who you guys are.
No. We're not as famous as Tash, so well.
Not yet, at least.
No, not yet. So okay, I'm Maria. I'm from Denmark. So I study Near Eastern archaeology at the University of Copenhagen. Okay. And I'm on my last year of the master's, so I'm writing up my thesis right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to being done. And yeah, it's a long process. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I am just coming out of my undergrad of Archaeological and Forensic Science at Bournemouth University in England, hoping to go into a master's of bioarchaeology at Bournemouth again.
Awesome. Well, awesome.
Yeah.
And I just dig holes.
Which is my dream.
Yeah, if I can rescue, I will rescue. But no, yeah. So we do. It's field archaeology. I think you call it CRM in the States.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's what I do, and I've been doing that since I graduated in 2013.
Wow.
It's been some time.
Yeah, and Ben and I, well, I'm an alumni of Ben's university, which is Bournemouth. So we're pretty
okay.
hands-on university we are, I would say. I'm so happy actually I went there. At the time I wasn't, but now I really appreciate going to that university because all the skills that you get is
right.
Yeah, starting out it's like, oh god, this is awful. And then you come out like, actually it wasn't too bad.
It was the best time of my life. Okay, so yes, Carlton, please explain to us from your point of view, no pressure, the difference between archaeology and anthropology.
The difference, well, in the United States, archaeology is anthropology.
Okay.
So that's, from the American perspective, anthropology is 4 fields. You have linguistic anthropology, bioanthropology, cultural anthropology, and archaeology. The archaeological perspective in the United States is the study of human history through their material culture. And we rely a lot on cultural anthropologists. Most of our departments are cultural anthropology departments, and we're kind of just the dirt diggers they keep in the basement so we don't have to lug things up and down the stairs all the time. And they help us a lot in terms, because, they study living people. So we need them more than they need us, which is kind of that relationship. So we're always picking their brains where they could care less about what we do. Well, because they already have the material culture. They know where it comes from, and they can ask the person who made it what it's for. Whereas we don't have that ability working in deep time. Linguistic anthropology in the States is probably the least studied. Most people are just in linguistics departments, but for us, everyone in archaeology in the States is an anthropologist first and foremost. We have some of the best schools. They're 4 field studies. So if you're getting a master's in undergrad, you take all 4 subfields. And you might specialize in one, but you're a holistic anthropologist in that way. And then sometimes when you go to grad school, that starts petering off. I was lucky enough to go to 4 fields university for my master's. And here at Boulder, we have 3 of the 4 subfields, and linguistic anthropology is just kind of out in the linguistics department. But we still have we still work with the linguistic anthropologists. They're just not housed in our department. So yeah, for us, archaeology is anthropology. There's not much of a difference.
So
you guys call cultural anthropology social anthropology out your way, right?
Not in Denmark, no.
Not in Denmark?
We call it, like, the translation would be, I think, oh wait, now I'm actually not sure. I think we have the same time, but actually now I'm not sure because we have so many subfields. Can I ask you though, what is linguistic anthropology?
What is linguistic anthropology?
Yeah,
so,
like I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so that's actually outside of archaeology. That's kind of the subfield of anthropology I study the most.
Okay.
And it's the study of human culture through language. It's a little different than linguistics because linguistics is more of the rules and regulations of the language itself, whereas linguistic anthropology is more so trying to understand how language affects the way an individual or a population thinks about something.
Okay, I've heard of that then.
Yeah, so there was a movie that came out a couple years ago. It's called Arrival. It involved aliens, but it was heavy in linguistic anthropology theory with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. But I think it's phenomenal only because you think of linguistics and what's the difference between linguistic and linguistics. And it's not as rules based. It's more of like, how does the structure of a sentence or the structure of a paragraph affect how someone perceives the world around them? So that's kind of the mindset they're looking at, is like, how can you see someone's worldview through the language they speak?
Okay, cool. I've heard of it then. I just needed to like hear what it is about, like from that, I think the wording of linguistic anthropology. I've done all my courses in English, so I've probably heard it before, but yeah, I don't know.
Right.
You know, I'm not even sure we have something like that in the UK. I think if you do linguistics, that's just sort of
That's
what comes with it.
Right.
We have, yeah, we just do, I think we have linguistic, but then we have like, we don't have anthropology, linguistics, and then we just have like Egyptology, Archaeology, Danish, English, like that, Japanese. So you have like studies of those cultures and languages like that.
Right. Yeah. So for us, I'm thinking, I had a linguistic anthropologist on my committee, and she works in Iceland. Yeah. So that's her big thing, is she studies the Icelandic language and its relationship to Danish and this, that, and the other thing. And
Wow.
so there's not that many linguistic anthropologists. Out of the 4 subfields, it is the least occupied. And, you know, that's the one that most, if you're not a 4 fields department, it's because you're missing a linguistic anthropologist.
Okay.
Yeah. So because it's so similar to linguistics that a lot of linguistic anthropologists just end up in linguistics.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think maybe for us, it's bridged more with etymology, maybe. In etymology schools, they really, I think that's the closest thing I can think of where they really do study linguistics in this sort of aspect. That's my cat in the background. Apologies.
No worries.
I don't know, Ben, what would you say? Do you think etymology maybe is the closest thing for us? But even then, it's pretty broad.
Yeah, I don't really know enough about it to really say. I would say yes, but I don't know.
Let's just go with yes.
Yeah.
Well, as we have Carlton on, should we pick his brains? What else can we pick his brains on about? Forensic sciences. So this was the main topic of our discussion, and then we've kind of stemmed into human remains and the burials and the kind of just everything to do with that. But so for us, we would say that forensic sciences, like the core of the scientific side, is stemmed from archaeology, the archaeological aspect, the sciences in that. If I remember correctly, that's how we learnt it at university.
Yeah, pretty much.
But then it's more the
archaeology is what led into forensic practices.
Yeah, so actually my undergraduate degree was at a forensic anthropology school. That was not my focus, but I remember very vividly that if you wanted to be a forensic anthropologist, you had to pass a test, and that test was you basically had to stick your hand in a bucket of liquefied human goo. And if you can deal with that, you could be a forensic anthropologist. And we went to the body farms in Tennessee to see all the magnificent deterioration of human people.
Yeah.
And for forensic anthropology, our professors were the state forensic anthropologists. So we would sometimes go out on criminal cases to.
Cool.
Yeah, that was.
Wow. I can't believe how relaxed it is.
No.
I did not go. That was not me. I like my dead people dead by thousands of years. Like, I don't like any skin. So like, I missed out on those field trips. That wasn't my gig in the slightest, but for some people it was. So forensic science is kind of like the heart of archaeology. And that's how you guys are taught in on your side of the pond?
We're kind of separate. So for us, the main difference is it's the importance of it in the current situation. So like cold cases. I would really say in the last, even maybe World War One, because World War One, or is this, I think, a bit of a border, but we don't really go that far back. In the last maybe 70 years, I would say it's maybe forensic.
Yeah.
But I have been on archaeological sites in recent years where my colleagues have found burials from, I think, 1600s, where we still do have flesh and tissue, like the brain and some other parts of manhood, should we say, that is still intact, and hairy feet. So it's it really just depends on, but then that's, of course, it's archaeology.
Right.
But generally, I would say 100-year mark.
Yeah, typically, like, as long as there is reason for it to go into court, it will instantly be forensic and is completely out of the realm of archaeology.
Yeah, because in Denmark, forensic sciences. I had to look it up to be sure what I'm saying now. You study that with medicine. So like it's not archaeology. It's medicine.
Right.
I just had to be sure about that before I said it, but we don't study forensic like that in archaeology. So you can do like bioarchaeology, or you can't really do that much because we're pretty limited in some ways in Denmark, because archaeology is very underfunded. There's a lot of cuttings on the universities, especially the humanitarian parts of the universities. They ask us to cut all the time, and then archaeology, and especially Near Eastern archaeology, with so few people studying it, so it's an easy place to cut funding. So like there's a lot of stuff we don't have as much anymore, I think. But forensic sciences, I think, is forensic medicine it's called here more.
Okay. For us, like, forensic anthropology is just a subfield of bioanth, and it's all under the anthropology department. But mostly, forensics itself is mostly a forensic, it's either under criminal justice, that school, if you're trying to solve cases like fingerprints, collecting DNA, and then you have forensic anthropologists. And I think really it's a 50-year mark. Kind of, that's how in the US that anything is archaeological if it's beyond 50 years. But when it comes to cases and solving crimes, you can be a forensic anthropologist, and they work closely with other like bioanthropologists and archaeologists if it starts dating back. We had a case in, I think, Tennessee, with a cemetery, was kind of digging up people's remains and basically trying to clear the property. And he was kind of found out that this graveyard was basically digging people up, selling, just moving them and burying new people. And it was kind of a big case. But the dates went back all the way to the Civil War. So it was kind of a collaboration between forensic anthropologists and archaeologists to kind of figure out what was going on, who was missing, and where did they go. But we're much more, because it's all in, for us, archaeology, like all that stuff is under anthropology. We're such a close-knit community that we have those strings that we can pull from multiple angles to help us in our work.
Yeah.
See, for us, to exhume a body, we need to get permission from the Department of Justice in the UK anyway. So if I was to find skeletal remains or just some sort of human remains, and it's in my realm, it's in an archaeological site, I am allowed to expose it to confirm that it is, maybe send a photo to our consultant, who's like the middleman between the client and us. And then we have to wait. We're not allowed to even do anything until we get permission to exhume the body. It's like a whole legal process. And then there's a whole reburying it, and the time scale, which is something else they consider. I'm assuming you have something similar.
No, God, we wish we had your laws. When it comes to protecting like graves, like we desperately wish we had more European style cultural resource, like cultural protection laws. Basically, if it's not on government property, do what you want. So that goes from people to archaeological sites. Like the United States is so very private property focused. Some laws don't even have like their own statewide laws protecting archaeological sites. That's, for us, it's a big deal because, for 15,000 years, it was not Euro-Americans living here, and they're kind of the target of a lot of the exhuming. And the indigenous populations aren't too big of a fan of that. Yet it still goes on. So if it's on federal property, yeah, we do have protections for it. So at least there's that, and that is a saving grace. But if it's private property, it's the property owner technically owns everything on their land, and that includes archaeology and people. So they can do what they want. And it's some people, literally on our podcast, we talked to a guy named Byron Schroeder from Texas, and this family literally had mummies from a dry cave in their house because the cave was on their property, and they just took them and they made like a mock cave in their basement where they could showcase the mummies. And it is 100% legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speechless. I can't believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. We wish our laws were more stringent in that way, but they're just not. Like, we wish we had more perspective. Like, I believe it's in England. Like, you guys, if like a private property owner has an archaeological site, like, they can't dig it up, right?
Yes, so it's all a part of the planning permission process.
Mm-hmm.
If we know that there's archaeology there, say it's an old structure, so if it's been given the title of a grade listed building,
Mm-hmm.
then they have a process. They can't do anything to it. There is ways that they try to get around it. So you have a pub that's from the 1800s, 1900s that was built, and they've got a grade listed certificate. So they've been appointed. This is a grade listed. You can't do any renovation works, no basements, nothing without an archaeologist on site, without planning permission. Sorry, Maria's coming through. So if that was to happen, and this process, then I would be there to watch we call it historic building recording, so HBR. And you have like special archaeologists who actually specialize in anything to do with buildings. On the other side, if you want to develop it's gone perfect. If you have to develop, say you want to build a housing complex on your farmland, you decided, I want to sell it, I want to build 100 houses. And if there's archaeology, like in one case, I was a job in south of England, and we found a Roman villa. So he couldn't do anything. And he was so frustrated. They were like, no, you're not doing anything on this. You can expose the whole thing, and we can give you permission. We can make this into like a museum, and people can visit it. He's like, no, I want to build houses. And they're like, you can't build houses, and it's not going to happen. It's like, that simple. It's not happening. You do not have the right to build. And as soon as they even try, that's when they get fines, and it's just like a whole legal system to protect that archaeology.
Oh, I wish we had that. I heard about that. There's a story in Reddit recently about a similar case of a contractor working on one of your historic buildings and messing it up and getting fined a lot. But yeah, in the United States, we have it's called the National Historic Register. Similar thing, you can put buildings on it. It's mostly famous people from colonial days, their houses, but being on that register doesn't actually protect the property. So it could be a historic place and you can do whatever you want to it. It's just kind of like a little certificate you get that says, yeah, this is historic, but it actually comes with like 0 protections for the building itself. Yeah. So
I need to correct myself from what I said before, because the forensic thing is medicine, but they also deal with the archaeological human remains. So I just needed to correct myself because I don't want anyone to think I don't know stuff, because I didn't know this. I forgot this. Just like, so I don't inform people.
It's not a job interview, it's fine. It's our opinions on stuff that we are interested in. So as long as no one bases their research on it, it's fine. We might inspire people to research further, which please, if you're interested, read, Google. We've got some videos we can send. Maybe I'll add some links, actually. I'll put some links into the video, into the description box, that could lead people into the right direction easily. So for us, Carlton, the European Union as well has legal protection in general. It's different now, of course, with the UK and Brexit, but before the EU policies, we actually had our own. So we go by 1979 that protects archaeology. If I remember correctly, that's the first. Yeah, Ben's nodding, so yes.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah, it's the first one that protects archaeological sites in general. So as soon as it's on a register, it's protected. It's protected. We have archaeological parks. Again, these are registered. We have individual monuments, and we have an online database, which is literally called Archaeology Data Services, and ADS. And we can explore any sort of archaeological, anything that's been documented, recorded, any work that's going on. We can access it all online. Once it's all been paid for and been processed. Unfortunately, some stuff that we do, for example, what I would do, it could take 5 years before it gets online, even longer. It's down to money, unfortunately, and the protection of the site. So half.
It's always about the money.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
money talks.
Yeah.
But at least you guys have an online database. We don't, and you guys have those protections. So even though it might take time, we don't have anything like that.
Really insane to me that there's nothing basically. Like that sounds.
Yeah, it's really
Right.
surprising that how little protection there is over your historical monuments, really.
Yeah.
Well, you have to think most of the people that run this country are not related to the people that have lived here beforehand. So to them, they don't care.
Yeah.
But like the colonial things, Civil War, battlefields, ships,
Yeah.
anything basically post 1776 is pretty protected because that's their history and that's what they choose to protect. Anything beforehand is just kind of a curiosity.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the heart of it. They don't see that history as theirs, and they don't see themselves as stewards of that culture history.
No.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would have thought that the country as a whole would sort of see it as it was a part of the country's history, so we should protect it as a whole, like a collective, rather than this isn't us, so we should just shun it.
Yeah, but this country spent a couple hundred years trying to exterminate those people in a global, in a continental genocide. So still having them around is not very convenient. I mean, we have some of the, the cool stuff like Mesa Verde, the cliff dwellings, those are protected. But those are national parks, and they took those away from the indigenous people and said, you don't have any more say to this. This is our little tourist attraction. So we have those like the giant mound structures in the Midwest that make those the animals, serpent mounds, Moundville. So like the big sites are protected.
Yeah.
I mean, but those drive tourism. So, and some of those aren't even federal level, like Cahokia, which is the largest earth and mound works north of central Mexico, is just a state park. And that pyramid, if you can see it from St. Louis. It's really weird here, to be honest. And honestly, when we learn about cultural resource laws, like we would love to have the European system here. Like that's what we would like vie for. And for even as bad as we have it, paleontologists in the United States have it worse than we do. They finally just got a law protecting paleontological sites in the last decade. So it's just not a focus here in the States. Culture history like that, like we don't have a Department of Culture, we don't have a cultural minister, like we don't have anything of that sort. Not even on state levels.
Well, I did not know that there is no like cultural ministry or something like that. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Was, like, super common to have that. I just expected it.
Yeah. No, we have a Department of the Interior, but that's focused mostly on natural resources. I mean, it's supposed to protect cultural sites, but it just doesn't. That's not their focus. Logging and oil extraction.
Oh, sure.
So,
okay.
Most archaeology here in the States is, cultural resources management, and that's archaeologists working on pipelines.
Wow.
Pipeline surveys, windmill surveys, basically doing things for energy and making sure that there's nothing archaeological in the way. So that's the bread and butter of what we do, honestly, is academics is a sliver. And outside of that, it's basically working for energy companies, and it's required by law, except right now, because we're in a pandemic. So our moron president said, we don't care about culture at all. Let's just get rid of that law for now, which is illegal. And that's the world that we live in at the moment. So not only is our country ill prepared for cultural protection, but under the current administration, it is very much threatened, even more so.
Some of the things he's coming out with at the moment as well, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, we have a question on Instagram from women_in_archaeology. So hello, Ellie, who is the curator of that Instagram account. She asked, do you think that there's a right or wrong thing to protect in terms of heritage, or should we protect it all?
Personally, I feel like whatever the culture or cultural history may be, we should protect it as a bookmark in history. Like, although we can have, a bit of historical revisionism saying, oh no, how barbaric, awful, terrible, never do that again. we still need to admit that actually that is a part of history. That is an awful part of history, or a really nice one.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's still a part of, you know, where we came from, who we are.
I think in the US, you've had a lot of like Confederate statues being torn down. And I think like that's good because that's kind of just praising that they did these things. But I don't know, like, if you think about like Second World War concentration camps, they're horrible, but I think they're really important to preserve and have there, especially because you can still learn so much from them. When I was in Israel, the site I worked on, we had one archaeologist who worked on the project, one of these projects, I think it's in Poland. He came and talked to us about like what they were doing there, and he's Jewish, and a lot of people excavating there are Jewish actually. And he came and like told us about this whole experience and how it was important to like their history too. So even though it's like a horrible chapter of history, as you say, Ben, as long as we kind of remember to say it's horrible, but like I think there's a difference like to like having a statue of a person who killed a lot of people standing like out, to have like a preserved area where you can like tell people about what happened here and how horrible it is.
I think the worst thing a society can do is actually just sweep things under the rug, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I saw a post recently of concentration camps in Kenya by the English after the Second World War that
What?
until then I'd never heard about.
Me neither.
But it's real. It happened, and it's been completely swept under the rug, and more than likely it's going to cause a bit of a stir among many people. And I think that's the worst thing possible. You know, we should just say, yeah, that did happen. It was a really bad thing to do, but it did happen. It's just wrong, you know.
Yeah.
Morally and ethically.
Like we need to learn from history, and if we just sweep things under the rug, we will never learn from it. Like how would other people learn from it if we don't tell the story?
Right.
Yeah, and like you say, putting them, you know, on a pedestal or making iconography, that is wrong. But what can you do?
And Carlton, I guess you would say yes, because I think in your situation, from the sounds of what's going on, like any opportunity to save the heritage is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially here, I think it's pertinent. I think the context matters, like the Confederate statues. That's a special case. Those are all put up in the 60s during civil rights as a means of like reminding minorities, like, guess, you know, this is who we believe in.
Yeah.
But outside of like that kind of special case in the context, like, yeah, we still have the battlefields and, but as I said earlier, I think more things in the United States need to be protected. So yeah, I agree. I was actually really curious about the concentration. I was going to ask that myself, the concentration camp example, but do they still preserve those in Europe, in Poland, and?
Oh yes.
Yeah, there's actually a Netflix documentary on that exact one I spoke about. Yeah. I can't remember the name of it. I will try and figure it out in a moment. But it's about the excavation of that concentration camp. So yeah, and I think it's really important to also, there's people out there denying that the Holocaust ever happened. So like, in that way, it's really important too. 6 million Jewish people was killed, and like it's a big part of their history. So even though it's a sad part of it, it's still important. And like, as I said, I've been to Israel, and in Israel they have this like the Jewish people. I was in a car with a girl who used to drive me to and from work, and she told me a joke, and I just froze because she was joking about Holocaust and concentration camps. And I was like, I just froze. I was like, I can't laugh at this. And she was like, oh, we all joke about it. It's like, but for them to also have the opportunity to like learn about the history, and a lot of them lost someone there. So it's like important to preserve it, I think, in that sense.
Right.
Berlin has it's an amazing museum / memorial. Brilliant. Like really to show and the things that they show in this exhibition is remarkable. Really, it brings a lot of it's very emotional. Just the setting, even the setting of how they show the artifacts, the letters from people during, of course, World War II. So there's ways that they're trying to continue the education to let you know that it did happen, and you can visit Auschwitz. You can go there, and a lot of, like, especially in the UK, we go there for history school trips. We would go to see it, and it's a lot of people do visit there every year. I'm not sure on the statistics, but it is a well visited site. And there is something slightly different. It's about the retrieval of human remains in mass burial sites. They do this in France, this is a long time ago, but basically people go there and they try to exhume as much as they possibly can, and if possible to give it to the family, or at least tell the family we found the remains of this soldier. So it's actively, I can't remember the technical term for it, but there's people who are actively trying to dig up the mass graves and rebury them, and they did rebury them, and they were unmarked graves, but they wanted to bury them. So it's definitely I would say there's a lot more, I guess, that goes on in Europe in that sort of sense, from the sounds of it. And we do have something called battlefield archaeology.
Yes.
So, but it's not as popular here, I would say, as maybe in the US. It's still relatively new. It's a new term, I would say, in my opinion.
Well, for us, everything's pretty much medieval, so.
That's true.
We don't have battlefield archaeology here. I don't think we've had a lot of battles in the same way. Like, we've had battles in Denmark, obviously, but I feel like it's not in the same way as, like, the Civil War, for example. They have a lot of, like, ships and stuff because we have so much water.
I love maritime archaeology.
People, of course.
We have another question from the Silken Tribesman. Do you think we often simplify the relationship between ancient societies and material things?
Ooh.
So do we simplify the relationship between ancient societies and material objects?
I think I would say yes. And in America, in a US context, you know, because there's only, if you look at it quantitatively, there's only so much you can say about an object quantitatively. And then once you start getting qualitative or interpretive, you know, your conclusions just kind of become abstract. So some people do that, right? In terms of trying to say, what did this pot mean to somebody? So I mean, there's two ways you can look at it. Like, this is the number of sherds. This is how big they are. This is the thickness. It probably was a jar or a pot. Maybe some residue analysis with what might have been in it. And then anything outside of that just becomes interpretive, and anyone's guess could be completely right, because it's not necessarily, you can use modern examples, but there's only so much. What's the relationship with contemporary material culture with prehistoric? Do we have the same meanings? Like, where are the same people? Do they feel about the same objects throughout time and space? So
yeah, if I may put a twist on it, I find that I talk a lot to people that do prehistory in England. So we're talking our Neolithic, which is what, 8,000 years ago. And when they dig these sites, they almost overcomplicate a lot of these things rather than simplifying. Like, they'll see a nice flint, like a hefty flint rock, and they're like, oh, this was a musical instrument. And you're there like, or it was just a rock.
Yeah.
right.
I don't know, in Denmark, like, I feel like archaeology here is both doing the science part of it, finding the residues and looking at the pottery, if you find that, and then also do the interpretation of what did this person do with this pot. So it's like both very interpretative and also very like analyzing stuff from like a more scientific point of view. And I don't know, I don't think we overthink it that much, but I think it depends so much of the person, the archaeologist, basically. I don't think you can just say like the whole field of archaeology overthinks or underthinks. It depends so much about the person who does the analyzing and who's in charge. Because there's so many ways of doing archaeology. You have like processual archaeology and post-processual archaeology, and that's two very different ways of doing archaeology and thinking of archaeology. So I think there's like, what kind of archaeologist are you? That's also a big part of it.
I think a lot of the time as well, we don't really simplify the material culture, but actually simplify well, the societies at the time. We think, oh, they were inferior to us now. Like, actually, no, they were just as smart. Like, there was no reason why they couldn't do these things. We just don't like to think we're not better.
Yeah, I feel like that's the whole thing about the pyramids and that it was aliens who built them. I'm like, because people think that people back then couldn't build something magnificent and big, so they have to find someone else who could do it, and that's aliens.
Yeah.
And it's the same way we think about Neanderthals, like the whole inferior complex, that we need to be better, we need to be more smart, we need to be the best. And I had a discussion with an old friend who was like, yeah, but like modern humans today, oh, we have so much and blah blah. And I was like, dude, think about the person who invented fire, for fuck's sake. We wouldn't be here without that. Like, you know, it's all about perspective, because of course today, like, oh, we invented the computer, the internet, all of this, yeah, but we wouldn't be here without like the invention of agriculture. So it's all about like the time frame too. Like, if we hadn't invented this, where would we be today? So like, thank that person who invented fire. I don't know how many million years ago that was, Homo sapiensis or something, who did something, and then here we are, we can cook. Like,
very true. Okay, I have one more question. How important do you think descendant communities are in conducting how we approach those histories and archaeologies? So again, how important do you think descendant communities are in conducting how we approach those histories and archaeologies? I think this is again from Women in Archaeology, so it's probably from the angle of when you have like indigenous groups who can and maybe should record their and have the opportunity and resources to record their histories and their archaeologies. So I think it's actually from this angle, how should we approach it?
Yeah, so that's been a huge problem here in the States for a long time. It used to be what we called a consultation model, in which archaeologists and scientists would basically ask the descendant community, what do they want? What do you think? And honestly, it didn't matter what the descendant community said, because it was a consultation. We've recently, and I'm really proud to be part of this institution that's moving towards collaborative. Right now, first off, to answer the question, they need to be involved. It's their history. They should have a say in what goes on from start to finish. And so we've taken that model, and Mesa Verde, the cliff dwellings here in Colorado, their museum, which has been around for almost 100 years, is being renovated. And we've taken the over 20 descendant communities, Navajos, Pueblos, Utes, Apaches, and we've brought them together with the Park Service and academic archaeologists. And as a team, we're all starting from what we want to see this museum become, and how do we want it to represent everybody. So that's where we're moving forward in the United States, because most, anything prior to 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, is indigenous. And they have an absolute right to be a part of it. And I think, especially here in the States, more and more indigenous persons are getting degrees in anthropology and are doing it for themselves.
That's really cool. Yeah. I agree, like indigenous people should of course be involved in their own culture. Like it's not okay for, like, that's the colonialism again, like just going in and be like, I'm a white person, I have the rights for this, kind of weird thought. So I just agree with you.
I think actually I will be doing, and maybe you guys will be interested in, I'll be doing another episode, live stream, kind of focusing on colonialism and how it's affected archaeology and history. Not too much history, but more so the archaeological side we will focus on, because history then will be here for hours and hours and hours. So I think it's quite important to highlight it, because more so now, especially in the last year, I would say, me personally, I've come across more research that is focusing on how colonialism has impacted the way we interpret archaeological deposits, historical records and sources, the use of words. In the UK, there was a large debate about the word Anglo-Saxon. Should we use this term? So
don't get me started.
So I think we could focus that on for another time, though, and then maybe, because we've been streaming now for close to 2 hours. Carlton, it's been amazing. Yeah, so I think maybe we should probably call it quits and let Carlton have a relaxing morning.
Thank you.
What time is it?
It's almost noon, so I still have a day ahead of me. I gotta go. Yeah, so I'm gonna be okay.
Okay, but yeah, thank you all so much for joining in on this stream. It's been really interesting. We've touched on so many topics, and hopefully shown people that there's so much more to archaeology than the word archaeology and Indiana Jones and everything else we see on TV. There's a lot more to it. So again, thank you, Carlton, for dropping in literally within like 10 minutes. That was amazing.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you guys. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good.
Okay, so I'll just say thank you everyone for joining us, and join us, I think on Wednesday will be the next stream, where we'll be talking about cylinder seals with Angelina from Austria. So until then, guys, have a lovely few days, enjoy quarantine, try to be healthy, and don't get too, do we have another question before I end it? Oh, we have another question. Well, let's answer this one, and then that's it. We're gonna go offline. Okay. Really? Okay, this is no. Okay, so this is from the Silcon tribesman again. Can any of you think of specific examples of knowledge or skills we have lost in society and relearned?
I think some of those beer recipes that are coming out of the Mediterranean have been rather helpful.
Yeah. Also, those isn't it Yale or something that has like a cookbook, a Sumerian cookbook or something insane, or Babylonian, I think it is, where like they found old recipes and then recreated them. I know there was a course at my university where you could like recreate Babylonian dishes, so like relearning that way, I guess. Doesn't taste great as far as I know, but yeah.
I think in the UK they try to do, there's a name for it, but they want to like look at old food recipes and they try to cook them again. And they're never as nice as well. To be honest, they sound horrid and they definitely don't taste any good, and they smell really bad. But it's the process.
I saw something recently where a guy's been like remaking bread from Pompeii because they found like a loaf of bread just carbonized, and I don't know. I'm gonna watch that channel because honestly that sounds great, because I can't find yeast anywhere in the United States to make my own bread at the moment.
I had a really big issue in the UK. I couldn't find fresh yeast. You only have like the dry one, and that was just so odd to me. I was baking in the UK and I couldn't find any, like only the powder one. It was very frustrating as a Danish person who bakes all the time.
Yeah, we don't have great bread. We're not known for our bread industry. That's why we go to Europe. That's why we go to the Central Europe, as we say. And everyone gets excited over like the fresh bread in like, Germany, France, everywhere. Okay.
Just to give us hope for the little things.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're not known. What else? I can't think of anything else right now. Of course, now it's becoming fashionable to do flint knapping, and people are really learning these skills. And if you look at experimental archaeology, they're really trying to reintroduce the skills, leather making and things like that, to show how they did it in the past, and maybe especially now with current times, who knows what we will have access to. As Carlton said, he wants to make some bread.
Yeah, I have
Let's
a
go
box of
Pompeii.
flint downstairs. Like I have a whole napping
Yeah.
system. Like I'm ready to go, and I have
Exactly.
ottlottles. And one of my
That's-
colleagues here is an ancient weapons expert, and he's been trying to get ottlottle hunting legal in Colorado for a couple of years. So,
That's really cool.
Well,
yeah,
if I may say, if you're interested in flint napping and all the prehistoric ways of doing things, you should definitely follow Will Lord on Instagram.
Yes, I was thinking of him as well.
Yeah.
Will Lord, yes. And his brother has an account. Oh my goodness. I literally always copy his stuff. But there's like
Oh,
2 or 3 brothers.
is it
Snot
Scott Biscuit?
Snot
Yeah.
Biscuit. Yeah. So they are amazing, like how they use the techniques. Like it's incredible how they flint nap, how they're able to, well, Will Lord flint naps, and his brother does more like he makes anything from bone. He uses bone, and he will sculpt skulls, and just amazing the craftsmanship. And I think these are nice examples of how people are able to relearn these skills that we've forgotten over time. We've
I
got
feel like
lazy.
experimental archaeology is just like a whole field of relearning, kind of. So like that could be like an answer, like just look into experimental archaeology. You'll find so many things that were people relearning.
Cool. Well, okay, I was going to say thank you all for the live questions on both YouTube and Instagram. It's definitely kept us on our toes, and it's been really fun to have so many different perspectives. So Ben and I are from the UK, then we have Maria from Denmark. Yes, Denmark, and then of course Carlton from the States. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. And everyone on YouTube, it's been great. Leave us comments down below, and hopefully one of us will answer them. And I'll also leave the links of their Instagram accounts, podcast links, and anything else that Ben or Maria may have that you guys may like. So I'm just going to go off. I don't know actually how to get off. 1 moment. There we go. Offline.